And welcome to episode 350 of Geektown Radio. We are back this week, and I have with me Ray. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me back, and welcome to August.
yes, welcome to August. I was thinking we should probably do something big for 350, but I was completely disorganised, so we're just doing a normal show. Maybe we'll do something for 360 or something. Maybe we'll do that.
You get me and Matt on for a little bit of a face-off quiz again, like we did last time.
Yes, maybe we'll do that. How have things been? I've been away for a few weeks, so you've not been on the show for a while. What have you been up to? Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with your film news?
Well, yeah. Shall we go in with my top 5 stories for July? Go.
Yes.
Well, what a brilliant month we had, and why I wanted to pick through lots of different stories, I've actually decided to pick 5 stories from the Marvel announcement that took place just a few weeks back with Kevin Feige and his team, where he set out the MCU's Phase 5 and Phase 6 timelines, what this means, and from all of those stories and all of those announcements, I've decided to pick 5 of my favourite stories from that. So yes, I'm going a bit off piece this month, Dave, but I think that's something that us Geektown listeners would hopefully like us to delve into.
Yes.
So the first story I'm going to talk about is the Wakanda Forever trailer.
Yes.
A very anticipated trailer. Wanting to know how they're going to take the story on in light of the departure of Chadwick Boseman. Mm-hmm. And it's very emotional. I don't know if you got that. It was a really emotionally charged trailer. Yeah. Gave us lots of questions. We saw some key characters in there that are going to shape some of the future phases. And the one really key sort of line I picked up on, which makes me question like Shuri's place, was the mum, played by the fantastic Angela Bassett, says, "I've lost all my family." And that just really intrigued me, because we know she's got a daughter. So what does happen to Shuri to, build that storyline along? But yeah, a hugely clicked on trailer in its first few hours of release. I think it, again, just like everyone seems to do, it seems to overtake the previous one. And I think this overtook Thor and Love and Thunder's clicks on and like views in its first like 24 hours. And what did you think of the trailer, Dave?
Yeah, it's very interesting. That line is intriguing, particularly. We see Queen Ramona, Angela Bassett's character, on the throne at the moment. And it seems T'Challa has been killed off in the MCU as well, which makes sense that, because, I mean, the Black Panther character can get passed on, but obviously T'Challa was very much Chadwick Boseman, so they don't want to recast that, obviously. There's some interesting bits and pieces. I mean, Shuri is in the trailer, but whether she's kind of gone off on her own, maybe, or and they're moving around, I don't know. So that's kind of interesting. We know Atlantis is involved in this as well, because we know Namor is in here. So we've got that coming up, and that's an introduction of a fairly key Marvel character that we haven't seen yet. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, so there's lots of underwater stuff. Interesting, the DC managed to get to the sort of Atlantean stuff before the MCU did this time around.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting as well. I'd heard in some other discussions that actually Phase 4 finished with Thor and the end of Miss Marvel, and Phase 5 was starting with She-Hulk. But obviously Kevin managed to set this out that actually Wakanda Forever now will end Phase 4, and Phase 5 officially starts in 2023 with Ant-Man and Quantumania.
Yeah.
So that was interesting as well, to get that clarity from them, from a lot of people sort of playing around with where the phases end. Mm-hmm. And that sort of leads us on to the next sort of key point, was where Phase 6 comes into things. So thinking ahead, Phase 6 will be almost like we had Infinity War and Endgame. We're going to have 2 major Avengers films. They're called the Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, and they're going to build up our new villain, which is taken over from the mighty Thanos, over the course of the next 3 years. And that will come to cinemas on the 2nd of May and the 5th of November 2025. Now, we always say this with a pinch of salt because we do not know what is around the corner, what's going to happen, post-production delays, whatever could happen. But at the moment, to have 2 major films within 3-4 months of each other is going to be pretty massive for Marvel. So it's got to be really key how everything sort of fits into play. Phase 6 still looks very brief. We know that because we think there's probably going to be more. Some series might get reorders, etc. But at the moment, Phase 6 is supposed to start in 2024 and culminate in these 2 big films. And Dave, what do you think of these? Even the titles, Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars.
Well, we've seen a little bit of Kang already, or a variant of Kang in Loki. So we know that character was starting to introduce. We also know the overall saga for this phase or these phases is the multiverse saga, which sort of takes over from the Infinity War saga. So that makes sense, Kang Dynasty being one of them. I don't really know exactly what the Secret Wars storyline is, so that will be a sort of interesting one. I will have to read up on the comic books for that. I know it's a big comic book. I think those are going to be 2 kind of interesting things. Of course, we don't know who the Avengers are at this point.
Exactly, and what that's going to look like. So yes,
so they've got to kind of rebuild the Avengers at some point. I mean, we know possibly Doctor Strange will be in there, and we've got younger Avengers around, so there is potential. I think it was mentioned with Matt last week, there is potential for a Young Avengers thing to pop up at some point, which they haven't announced. And also no mention of the X-Men anywhere in this at the moment. And, I was about to say, it comes to something where you've got so many cards in your pocket that you don't have to play the X-Men card when you're making big announcements. And, whether some of that will get fed into that Phase 6, where there are large gaps. I mean, there's 3 movies at the moment in Phase 6, and that's it. So whether that will fill out or whether that will get bumped over into Phase 7, and that will become, we've started seeing little hints of mutant stuff being dropped in. So maybe it will sort of get sprinkled throughout this, and then it will really hit in Phase 7. But I'm glad they're finishing with this sort of big double Avengers movie. I think that's a really good way to go.
My next story, story number 4, will be something a bit of fun, I hope, with the Agatha Coven of Chaos, which is going to come to our screens on Disney Plus winter 23-24, which will see the fantastic Agatha Harkness from WandaVision, the villain we all absolutely loved to hate, obviously, but we're going to explore her past, and that's made me think whether this is going to be a time jumpy series and see how she has survived as a witch through all of her years, or whether it will be set in the time of Salem and things like that, like we saw in the episode of WandaVision when we explored her past. I'm really excited for that. That's one of the ones. I think Catherine Hahn is amazing, that character coming out, and obviously so many memes and come from her appearances, and I'm really excited about exploring that one, and that's a really positive story out of it. And then I will finish on a bit of a bizarre, but I don't know, I think happy but not happy, as the Daredevil news. So Daredevil is an original Netflix series. First series received quite well. However, the overarching comments from a lot of critics were that 16 episodes were just a little bit too much for this series. They could have really punched it down into about 8 for some good quality, and that was carried across to the Jessica Jones, the Iron Fist, etc. However, Disney Plus are bringing it back in a series called Daredevil Born Again, and oh my word, 18 episodes.
I know.
I mean,
it's the longest running thing. I think certainly the longest running Marvel show. I think it's the longest running Marvel or Star Wars show they've ordered so far. Yeah. I don't know whether that's going to get split into seasons or whether that is just going to be one solid 18 episode run. It's odd that they've said 18 episodes straight off the bat. Whether that was how they needed to do it to sign the actors and it'll actually get split into a couple of different seasons, or whether there's something else going on and maybe they're shorter episodes, maybe they're half an hour, or or maybe it is 18 hours of it. I mean, yeah, it's interesting, but it does depend how they split it up as well, because although it's 18 episodes, the criticism of the length of the Netflix series was they tended to be one storyline over 13, 14 episodes, and there were a couple of episodes you could have removed and it would have tightened up the story. It may be that there are multiple arcs that go through this, so maybe you have one arc for 5 episodes, another arc for another 5 episodes. It depends how they run it. So
we wait in anticipation.
Yeah, with different writers and a different structure, 18 episodes might not be a problem. It really depends on how it's structured and how it's put together. And the other thing is, of course, he's now integrated into the MCU, so it's possible that you could bring in other characters from across the MCU for him to interact with. So it might not just be Daredevil throughout the whole of this. So we'll see.
I personally don't think we're far off from the announcement that some of those other characters from the Defenders may be revived, not in their own series, but they may appear in some capacity in Daredevil. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get a few announcements along those lines.
No.
But yeah, so those are my 5 stories from the Marvel announcements that happened in July.
Yes, there was some good stuff in there, as we said last week, compared to DC, which basically threw up a couple of trailers and went, there you go, and that was it. I mean, we'll see. At the moment, Marvel definitely very much ahead, I think.
Definitely. On to some other stuff that I've been doing. So I have recently, obviously I've just finished term and then I went away, I went camping, so away from devices for a few weeks, a few days even, which was lovely and just sort of let me chill. But before that, I ploughed through a few things that were hanging on my list for ages. I finished Young Rock, second season of Hacks, and 10%, for example, they were hanging on. Out of some of the things I finished, I thought Hacks season 2 was just fantastic. I mean, I love season 1 and we were treated to that earlier this year, and then to see season 2 back on our screen so quickly, and Gene Smart and Hannah Einbender are just absolutely incredible. I just think their chemistry on screen and the way they deal with each other. And my favorite episode, a lot of people have talked about it, is the cruise, the lesbian cruise. And that episode, honestly, I was sitting with my mouth open, like I didn't know whether to laugh or cringe, but it was a very, 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 very good episode. So yeah, recommend all of those. Films, I watched a couple of films just before I went away camping. I watched The Grey Man. Obviously, I thought it was all about me, but apparently not. Which was a absolute crazy, huge budget thrown at a Netflix film. Lots of firepower and unbelievable scenes and setups with Ryan Gosling and lovely Chris Evans. It was okay. I drifted off a bit towards the end. Had some Ana de Armas was in that as well. Billy Bob Thornton was in it. A great idea. Apparently it's going to be more than one. This is going to be a various amount of spin-offs, and yeah, it was enjoyable romp, but I didn't take it too seriously, and so many bullets and destructions, and you know how much stick some of the Avengers movies got in the day when they destroyed cities and towns. There seemed to be no repercussions. What happens in Prague in this film is beyond what anyone would expect, but you know what, it was good, and it sort of really gave Ryan Gosling a little bit of depth to his acting. I know that sounds silly in an action film like this, but you know, he really did play a really good character and protagonist there. And also watched Bob's Burgers movies, which made me question why it really needed a movie. It was I mean, it was fun. I thought, what are they making special about this? It's like when The Simpsons had their movie. You know, you've got to have a good enough storyline, and the storyline was okay, but I don't know why it couldn't have been just 4 or 5 episodes split up, you know, an arc storyline, which I know is not normal for Bob's Burgers, but it was fun, enjoyable, but I don't think we don't need to plow on this film. What's next? Rick and Morty movie, human resources movie.
I'm sure a Rick and Morty movie will happen at some point.
Yeah, it's just, I'm not sure we really need it when the 22 minute episodes that they produce are really good and contain stories and great characters and voice cast and things like that. So those are the films I got. And have you watched either of those, Dave?
I haven't. No, I know The Grey Man has had very middling reviews. I mean, it literally has sort of across the board on all the sort of Metacritic and other sites has got like pretty much 50-50 reviews. So yes, it's got very middling support, that one. Bob's Burgers is not something I've ever watched, so I'm not going to jump into the film at this point.
You do need to know the series to what I realised that in the first. I've watched the series, and you do need to sort of know it. They do sort of try and cover it in case you haven't, but it is a good idea to know the film. Ongoing things. So when I got back from camping, I started picking up all the procedurals. And in one short day this week, I started the 3-hour crossover series of all the FBIs, which was the very big sort of Jeffrey Epstein based story. So you start with FBI, and then FBI Most Wanted take the storyline on and keep a couple of the characters, and then that leads on to FBI International, which again brings some of the characters from the first two FBIs in. And this massive 3-hour, I mean, apparently in US TV it was on one night. It was they all followed one another. So for fans, you would have been sat there just 3 hours in a row engaging in this storyline. So yeah, good. I mean, I enjoy the FBIs. I think I need to take a while to get to know the international characters. The FBI Most Wanted cast, that's a revolving door that's really quick.
Apparently so, yes.
So yeah, I was reading a bit of that because I was like, oh, where's that character? What's happened to that character, which I remember from the first one. But so if you want an American actor and you want a job on FBI, don't get cast in a main role because you won't be there very long is my gut. I also started watching CSI Vegas, which is really good. Throwback to the original CSIs, bring back some of the key characters in there. 911 Lone Star, I'm 2 episodes into their 3-episode opener, which is all about an ice storm that hits Texas. Now, we all know that wouldn't happen because of the climate and geography. But to be honest, knowing what our society's going through right now, so it's all set in the ice, and like Austin and Texas have been absolutely covered in snow and ice. And so I'm on episode 2 of 3, working through like the season opener. And also on BBC iPlayer, I started Sherwood, heard great things about it. I'm 2 episodes in. Solar Opposites, watching that weekly on Disney Plus. As you know, fan of that. I really enjoyed it, especially the Wall episode early on in this season, which... wow, it was like you were going down one way and you're like, oh my God, this is how they ended The Wall. But then it had a good twist at the end. And Only Murders in the Building. Absolutely fantastic. I'm also in love with the theme tune to Only Murders in the Building. I find myself humming it as I'm walking around, and just like, it's absolutely brilliant. And those 3 main characters are just so good together. And if you know, even when I heard that original casting about 2 years ago, for some reason, I just didn't see how she would meld with these 2 characters, but they are absolutely fantastic, and I can't rave on about Only Murders in the Building more because it's absolutely brilliant.
Yes, the theme, by the way, to Only Murders in the Building, is Siddhartha Khosla, who we've actually interviewed before, because I think it's the guy that did This Is Us. I think that was the other that's the other big show that he did. So Only Murders is a show that he sort of took on to run alongside, and now, of course, is his main gig. He did Love Victor as well, actually.
Oh, did it? And I just think it's so good for a show that is like a podcast. It's supposed to be based on a podcast. It's got that sort of callback to that being that little intro, and that the American podcasts really do build up the narrative with this sort of like style and design.
Yes.
And then I'll just end saying my wish list. Obviously, I've got a nice bit of time off this summer, and apart from a bit of an overseas holiday coming up, I do want to watch. I've heard great things or read different things about the Baby and Lazarus project, both on Now or Sky. And so there are 2 things that I'm going to be trying to watch before August is out, along with all my procedurals that I'm watching as well. So yeah, that's me, Dave. I think I've covered everything that I've been doing in July. Nice. What have you been doing in the last week?
Well, I mean, obviously I've been away for 3 weeks, and there's a few things that had started whilst I I've been away, and I'd completely forgotten about the launch of Solar Opposites, but I have actually watched the first episode of that now. I watched that earlier today, and when they popped up on your list, I was like, oh yeah, I haven't checked those yet. And Lone Star as well, I haven't started, so I'm going to start that later tonight, and I need to get back to the Lazarus Project because I've seen the 3 or 4 episodes of that, and I need to go back and watch a bit more of it because I really enjoyed that series. But in terms of sort of general stuff I've been doing, it really has been partly me trying to catch up on things that I just got behind on because I couldn't watch them while I was in America. So I'm now up to date on Better Call Saul and Westworld, and of course we're covering both of those over on Entertainment Talk with Matt, so we're doing weekly episodes for both those shows. Strange New Worlds I'm now up to date on as well, which I'm really loving that series. They've really got the essence of classic Star Trek with that show, from just the fun, the sort of week by week missions. There's no real overarching story as such. You know, stuff goes on from week to week, but there's no kind of massive like connecting story like there is with something like Discovery. And I really like that format and how they're working with it. And they had a particularly silly episode this week as well, which had them all in sort of period costume. And it was just very much the sort of classic, slightly sillier sort of Star Trek episode. So I really, really love that show, and they're doing a wonderful job. The cast are amazing. They bounce off each other so well. They're incredibly likable. It's really, really good and well worth watching. If you were turned off a bit by sort of the newer Trek stuff in Discovery, Strange New Worlds is very much back on target, I think. On the other side of things, I've been watching The Orville, which I think has one more episode to go, which oddly has become far more serious. and they're
really serious.
Yeah, I mean, tackling some interesting subjects and doing it in a very good way, I think, generally. Stuff to do with gender and equality and all that sort of stuff. They've actually been doing a really interesting job with that show, but they stopped playing things for laughs, and it's become a far more kind of serious sci-fi with the odd gagging. There are more gags in Strange New Worlds than there are in The Orville, which is a bit odd given that The Orville was basically a parody of Star Trek. So I found that kind of interesting. But yeah, I think there's one more episode to go of this run, and then we're still very much up in the air about whether it comes back or not.
Yeah, I saw a hashtag today actually saying renew The Orville, and I'm enjoying it. I remember the episode length are really a lot. I think I've just watched the episode where they are sort of trapped in a virtual world, and they're going around to different places, and it was a really good episode, but so long, and then you realize you've been watching it for an hour and 2 minutes, and then Disney Plus helpfully show you the episode lengths, and as they went down this, I think I saw it when there were 6 episodes available, they seemed to be getting longer as the season went on. It's just their Hulu element, isn't it, that's changed now?
Yeah, I mean, they're like a sort of 70, 80 minute plus episodes, some of those. I mean, they're full on almost hour and a half things, some of them. It's crazy what they've set out to do. I mean, it took forever for this to film because of the pandemic in between, and obviously you're dealing with a lot of CG stuff, and I mean, God knows how much it actually cost them, but the episode lengths are ridiculously long for this, because I put it on thinking, 45 minutes, whip through this before I go and do something. And yeah, you're there and thinking, this is what is this still going? And you look at it and it's like got half an hour left. You're like, oh, okay. So yeah,
exactly the same.
Really surprised by the episode length of it, but it's been really good. I mean, it's been very solid. There's various things going on behind the scenes as to whether Seth wants to continue doing it. I know he said that it's been much better at Hulu than it was when it was Fox, so there's that, but he also has a new deal with NBC, so there are things going on behind the scenes as to which may mean that it doesn't come back again, but we'll see. I hope they do bring it back because I really enjoy that show, but I know it is an awful lot of work for them, so we'll see what happens with that. In terms of new things, CSI Vegas, which you mentioned you've been watching, I started that. I was a huge fan of the original CSI and some of the spin-offs as well, so I very much enjoyed stepping back into that world. A bit like wearing an old pair of comfy shoes, that show, because it is new and it's slightly refreshed, but it's also very much the same thing.
So, know what's going on.
Yeah, they've got this sort of ongoing case, which is the thing that's sort of running more more background and is the excuse for bringing some of the old characters back. But it's also got the sort of, murder of the week thing by the looks of things going on as well. And sometimes the cases interact. So I'm really enjoying that. I think if you like the original CSI, there's no reason you wouldn't like this. It's really good. Lovely to see some of the old faces back. I know Sarah Siddall and Grissom aren't coming back for the second season, but they're talking about roping in other old cast members to come in for like a season. So it looks like they're going to be bringing in various people as they kind of move through the season.
That might be interesting. It might be an interesting approach to it, because there were some really good characters across some of those later seasons as well.
Yeah.
That could, you could definitely do like a couple of characters from Cyber maybe could pop in and help on a case, because that was a good spin-off. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens sort of moving forward. It's whether some of the old cast members only come back for one season or whether they stick around. I don't know, but the two actors that played those original roles were only signed up for the first season. They don't want to go back again, which is understandable given how they were brought in. And they were brought in for something very specific on this season. So it wouldn't sort of necessarily make sense for them to be hanging around for another season afterwards. The other thing I watched was Paper Girls, which is a new Amazon series. It's based on a Brian K. Vaughan comic book, which I have read and I really enjoyed the book. So I was quite interested to see this show come out. It begins in Halloween in 1988. It follows four paper girls called Erin, Mac, Tiffany and KJ. They're out on the delivery route and they get caught in the crossfire between warring time travelers and transported into the future. That's the setup for it. So they're dealing with how do they get back home and also meeting future versions of themselves as well. It's a really interesting setup. There are hints of Stranger Things in there.
Yeah, I've heard this rumor, Stranger Things with girls. Some people have classed it as in their review, a bit crudely, but...
Yes, it's not quite got the level of Stranger Things. It's not, I don't think, because of the fact that although it starts in the 80s, it's then moved into the future, it doesn't have that same sort of nostalgia thing going on. But it is primarily a young teen cast, and they're four that are thrown together and are facing this sort of big threat, essentially. So, and it's sort of sci-fi things going on. There's not as much horror element, really any horror element as such in this so far. So, yes, there are hints of it, but I wouldn't directly sort of say it's Stranger Things with girls. I think that's being slightly unfair to it.
Yeah.
So, the leads are really good. They're interesting characters. There's four fairly different character types in there. You've got sort of a tough girl, a sort of preppy girl, one that's desperately trying to look after her mother, and interesting mix of these four girls. They've done a really good job in converting the comic book across as well. So if you're a fan of the book, I think it will certainly be something interesting to watch. And it's a well put together sci-fi series, I think. So worth a look, certainly. But all 8 episodes of that are up on Prime Video if you want to go and check that out. It's called Paper Girls, definitely worth a look. Also, should point out, people are saying, oh, it's a rip-off of Stranger Things. The comic book itself predates Stranger Things by a year. So technically, Paper Girls was there first, if you're thinking of those comparisons. You could argue that it's actually Stranger Things as a rip-off of this, but I don't actually think that's the case in either direction. There are similarities in little respects, but they are very much their own thing, I think. So that's all the stuff we've been doing this week. Let's move on to some TV and film news. Kicking off the TV and film news, we have, of course, the renewals, cancellations and pickups. A couple of things cancelled or ending. One thing cancelled, which is The Wilds, which was that teen drama that was on Prime Video. I don't know whether you watched any of this. I think Daryl was watching some of it.
No, I heard about it and it was on my long list, but I never actually got around to it.
Yeah, this was a thing that follows a group of teen girls who crash on a desert island and are trying to fight a way to survive. There is a twist which is not really giving anything away because it's revealed fairly early on. The girls didn't end up on the island by accident. It was planned in some way. So they made a second season of it. it, it sounds like it's just not landing as well as they wanted it to. So that's 2 seasons and done that one. The big one, which is hot off the press because it was literally announced just before we started recording, The Flash is going to end with season 9, which is the upcoming season, which I don't think anybody's hugely surprised by because there's been rumours that this was probably where it was going because Grant only signed on for one more season anyway. And we had said before that that could be either one more season and they're done, or it could be a negotiating tactic from that point because the lead on Grey's Anatomy does that and complains about it being renewed every year but gets paid a big wodge of money to renew her contract every year. So Grant had only signed on for one more season, so there was talk of this being the final season. The interesting thing is it's only going to be 13 episodes and they're probably going to drop it mid-season rather than it coming back in the autumn season, the fall season this year. So that's kind of intriguing that they've cut the episode length. I don't think that's going to do it any harm because there's a lot of filler in that show. And I mean, we've talked quite a lot extensively at various points on this podcast of my issues with The Flash. Up until this point, the writing has gone drastically downhill, certainly in the last couple of seasons. So I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. The other original cast members, Candice Patton and Daniel Panabaker, are both set to return. Jesse L. Martin is signed on for at least 5 episodes, but he has got a new pilot on NBC as well. So he'll do 5 episodes if that pilot goes to series. He may do more if that pilot doesn't go to series. He's sort of sharing roles a bit, but I mean, he's a kind of secondary character anyway. So, you know, and if they've only got 13 episodes and he's only doing 5, you're not going to miss him that much out of it. So, you know, also interesting that, of course, CW canned a whole bunch of shows, including a bunch of the Arrowverse series like Legends and Batwoman back in May. So at least this is going to get an actual finishing send-off, which I think, given that this is sort of the flagship Arrowverse show now, Arrow has gone, I'm glad they are doing that at least. So.
Yeah, at its peak, it was like one of my favourite shows, Flash. I used to properly be geeking out on it week after week. But, you know, we've talked about it quite openly on here. I fell out of love with it during season 7, where it just lost its way with its storyline, didn't really know where it was going. You didn't really see him use his power or his suit. And that is just a shame that it got that way. But I'm glad it is getting its send off. And I just hope there's lots of Barry actually using his Flash powers. That's got to be the way to go.
Yeah, the episode, because I'm a little bit behind on it, I'm sort of catching up because it was obviously one of the shows which I didn't watch whilst I was away. So I'm catching up at the moment. And there was an episode actually directed by Katie Lotz from Legends. And it started off with like Barry doing loads of stuff and catching criminals. And I thought, oh, this sounds like it's going to be a really fun episode. And then 10 minutes in, he loses his powers. And you're like, for God's sake.
How many times?
You know, it's just like, it's so infuriating. Just let the Flash be the Flash. You know, it really, really bugs me. So we're basically now left with Superman and Lois, which is kind of separate anyway, because this version of Superman and Lois aren't really part of the Arrowverse stuff. And we've got that new Gotham Knights series, which didn't have a massively positive reaction to the trailer, I have to say. So there is that as well. But yeah, we'll see whether this is sort of the end of the superhero shows on the CW. Of course, the CW, as we mentioned before, is up for sale. It hasn't actually been sold yet, but it looks like it's going to get sold off to somebody else, and that's why there was all this cutting of the TV shows and stuff. Moving on to the renewals, we have iCarly has been renewed for a 3rd season by Paramount Plus, so that will be coming back. There's a show called Moonhaven, which is running on AMC Plus in the US. That's a sci-fi series with Dominic Moynihan, one of the Hobbits. I think he's probably what he's best known as. He's in one of the lead roles in this. I think it's only like 5 or 6 episodes. It's not a hugely long series, but that has been renewed for a 2nd season, so that will be coming back. Hopefully that means it will show up here somewhere, because I don't think it's even run on AMC over here. It's just not anywhere right now, so hopefully that will get sold to somebody. And Miss Scarlet and the Duke has been renewed for a third season. So apparently that's planning to be dropped sometime in early 2023, although they've only just started running the second season over here. So not too long to wait for the third season for that. That will be back. That runs on Alibi. In pickups and other news, in a rare bit of sensible scheduling from the people at E4 who appear to have woken from their drunken stupor, Rick and Morty season 6 is going to be simulcast along with the US. So it's going to land on the 5th of September at 4 a.m. because it's being simulcast. You can set your recorders and record it there. It will also be up on all four as well, so you can watch it, stream it directly on all four. It's also going to get repeats on Sundays as well. So if you have problems getting stuff off the internet, it will be run at a more sensible hour on Sunday as well. So you'll be able to catch it then. But 5th of September is when they're going to be dropping that. I'm very much looking forward to that coming back because I do love that show. And, you know, I love Solar Opposites as well, but very similar vibe from both of them.
Yeah. Rick and Morty's the OG.
Yes.
They're the OG, like, animation style. So.
Yes, out of the two of them, certainly. Fate the Winx Saga, that is back for a second season on the 16th of September. They've announced that's over on Netflix. I didn't catch the first season of that, but I know it got some sort of fairly positive reviews in that sort of young adult magic genre sort of show thing, which Netflix seem to have an abundance of. So that will be landing on 16th of September. Andor, the Star Wars series, that has had its release date moved back to September 21st. So it's gone back by almost a month. Not entirely sure on the reasoning for that. I mean, one possibility is the new Game of Thrones series was due out around about the same time, so it may be that. It may just be that they decided that they're trying to spread out the Star Wars series a little bit more. I don't know. But Andor will be moving back to the 21st of September. But they're going to drop the first 3 episodes in one go. So swings and roundabouts with that. There are a lot of episodes in that. I think it's 12 episodes for each season, and it has been renewed for a second season as well. So although there's 3 episodes, you've still got a bunch left after that as well. Sticking with Disney Plus, The Old Man, which is Jeff Bridges as a retired CIA agent that basically gets pulled back in. That has now got an air date of the 28th of September on Disney Plus. That is an FX series which is all run in the US, and other territories like Australia, I think, have already had this. So I don't know why it's so late over here, but it is. So if you want to watch that, I know some people have seen it and have sort of given it fairly middling reviews. I think it's got renewed for a second season, but 28th of September if you want to check that out. Let the Right One In, which is based on the movie that is coming on the 8th of October to Paramount Plus UK. That's a Showtime series. Basically, it looks like all new Showtime shows, rather than airing on Sky Atlantic where they were, will now be on Paramount Plus. That will be coming there. Did you ever see that movie? It's about a sort of father with a daughter who has sort of vampirism.
I haven't. It was when I was a teacher of film studies, it was an option film to be taught, but we had gone down a different route in our school. But I remember reading lots of stuff about it. But there's an original, isn't there?
Yes, and then the French,
Swedish, French.
I think it was French, might have been Swedish, I can't remember. But yes, there is an original one, and then there was a US remake of it, and now there's this, which is a series. So I know there's some interest in that, but yes, it will be coming to Paramount Plus UK. That's on the 8th of October, that lands. There was a couple of other little bits of news which popped out. Irony of ironies, Snowpiercer. Production on the 4th season has been temporarily suspended due to the temperature. They apparently had multiple cases of heat exhaustion, with 14 of the cast being taken to hospital. So they basically said the health and well-being of the show and cast and crew remains top priority. And I can see why. I mean, the problem is you're filming a show which is supposed to be set in these sort of Arctic temperatures, and everybody is kind of dressed up, and particularly, spoilers for anybody not up to date on the show, but there is some stuff in this upcoming season which is going to be set outside of the train rather than being all confined in the train. So, of course, it's still very cold outside in the Snowpiercer world. So they're all kind of dressed up in parkas and stuff, and it's like 30, 40 degrees outside. And they're basically, the cast are getting heat stroke. So they've had to shut down production for a little while until the heat sort of dies down in, I think it's shot in Canada, that. So that's unfortunate, but hopefully they get back up and running fairly soon. That's the fourth, I think, final season of Snowpiercer as well for that. And there was another little story that dropped out. Max Headroom apparently might be making a re-emergence with Matt Frewer reprising his role as Max Headroom. There is a new series that is potentially in the works at AMC from the people that were behind *Halt and Catch Fire*, who were apparently quite a good show, although I never actually seen it. I keep on kind of skimming past it and thinking I must go and watch that. Do you remember Max Headroom? I'm not sure whether that hits your age bracket or not.
No, nothing. That doesn't even ring a bell at all. When you were talking about it, I've never heard of it. No.
Max Headroom, for those of you that are on the younger side.
Oh, thanks.
It was essentially a sort of British cyberpunk TV movie called Max Headroom, 20 Minutes into the Future. And it became very much this sort of pop culture thing. It was on MTV a lot. He starred in sort of, I think he had his own music video show. It was designed to look like it was sort of this intelligent AI, artificial intelligence TV personality, but it was Matt Frewer in a bunch of makeup. It was shot as sort of this digitized thing and would glitch and stuff. So it sounds a bit weird now because we have the technology to kind of do that without sticking somebody under a bunch of makeup. So yes, it's a bit odd. And I don't know how they do it moving forward, whether they would go like with full CG with him doing face acting, or I don't know how they'd do it. But he was basically this disembodied head on a screen, and he became this huge pop culture phenomenon. Go and look it up, actually, Max Headroom. It's he actually had his own show as well, which ran on ABC for a couple of years. And he was on the cover of Newsweek, and there were ads for Coke and all sorts of stuff. And he's been referenced in a whole bunch of things since then, from like BoJack Horseman, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., a whole bunch of other TV shows make reference to Max Headroom at various different points. So, I thought that was kind of interesting that that's a character that they're looking to bring back in some way, because it feels so very 80s. So I'm intrigued as to how they're going to do that. Of course, *Halt and Catch Fire* was a TV show about the dawn of the sort of PC revolution, so that was sort of very 80s as well. So the guys behind that being involved with this sort of makes sense, but we'll see whether that actually makes it anywhere. But that's apparently being developed for AMC at the moment. Moving on to more developing TV shows, Eragon, the very popular book series, otherwise known as the Inheritance title, the whole book series from Christopher Poloni, that has got a TV series in development at Disney+. It was sort of leaked earlier, I think last week, that this was sort of happening, and then Poloni actually came onto his social media and confirmed that yes, it was in the works at the moment. He's actually co-writing and producing it. So, because if you remember, there was a movie based around this. I don't know whether you ever saw that.
I've seen the book title so much, because obviously you always think it might be some link to Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
But I don't think I ever got around to reading it or seeing the movie. But I vaguely remember it. Yeah. The key character, a young male character. Yeah,
follows a teen boy who becomes magically joined to a newly hatched dragon. Together they must learn what it means to be a dragon and rider as they fight in the resistance against a tyrannical king. That's the broad, basic setup of the plot for it. One of the advantages that this had, because the movie was not particularly well received as far as I remember, that this has Christopher Poloni actually co-writing it and producing it directly. So that, I think, is probably quite a good sign if he's got a bit more control over the vision of where they go with it. And I think for this sort of book, you're probably better off trying to do it as a series. It isn't confirmed as actually going to series yet. It is still classed as in development, so still might not make it. But I mean, they've got lots of stuff to work from if it does. It's the first book in the Inheritance title series of novels, which have sold like 33.5 million copies worldwide collectively. So, you know, not bad, really, as a sort of base to work from, I guess. We'll see whether that goes anywhere, but that is in the works at Disney Plus at the moment. Moving on to other upcoming series, Orphan Black, which has already announced a spin-off series called Orphan Black Echoes, that has found the person that's going to be the lead role, and it's Kirsten Ritter is going to be taking the lead role as the new clone, presumably clone. I mean, it doesn't specifically say that, but it says, set in the near future, Orphan Black Echoes takes a deep dive into the exploration of the scientific manipulation of the human existence. It follows a group of women as they weave their way into each other's lives and embark on a thrilling journey, unraveling the mystery of their identity and covering a wretched story of love and betrayal. So that's the setup for it. Kirsten Ritter is set to play Lucy, a woman with an unimaginable origin story, trying to find her place in the world. She will also exec produce the series as well, so she's signed on to exec produce. This will mark her return to AMC, because it's AMC that are making it, where she basically landed her breakout role, which was in Breaking Bad as Jane, Jesse's girlfriend on that show. And she always said that that show was the show that landed her the role as Jessica Jones. If she hadn't have got the Breaking Bad role, she doesn't think they would ever have seen her for Jessica Jones. I'm all up for her doing this. I think she's a wonderful actress. I mean, it's big shoes to fill following Tatiana Maslany, because that was a phenomenal performance that she put in that. But I can see her having fun, particularly playing around with clone roles in this, because I mean, we're presuming that it's going to follow a clone storyline, because that's the whole sort of thing of Orphan Black was clones. So I guess she's going to be playing some form of multiple roles in this. Big shoes to fill, I think, this one.
I take back my earlier comment about Jessica Jones possibly popping up in the Daredevil. Then.
Well, no,
she might be a little bit busy.
Yes, she might be. But I suspect that, although I don't think she's going to get her own series, which is a shame, because I thought the Jessica Jones series was brilliant, but it would mean that she could still find some time to be able to pop in and maybe do the odd guest spot on Daredevil, possibly. I would see that as maybe a possibility, because if you're bringing Daredevil across, there's no reason why you couldn't bring all the other characters over as well. It's from Anna Fishko, who worked on pieces of Her, The Society, and Fear the Walking Dead. She's creator, writer, and showrunner and exec producer of the show, along with John Fawcett, who was co-creator of the original series. Those are the people behind it. So it's got people that know what they're doing working on it. It's interesting she's joined as an exec producer on it as well. So I'm really interested to see where they go with this. And I mean, I loved the original show. I thought it ended very well. So it's going to be intriguing to see what they come up with for a spin-off of it. Did you watch Orphan Black? I can't remember.
No, I wasn't a huge fan of that, unfortunately. I tried watching the first couple of episodes when it was first broadcast, but yeah, it never appealed to me.
It's one of those shows that takes a little while to bed in, but once it does, and once you get hooked on it, it's a phenomenal piece of work. And Tatiana Maslany's performance is absolutely outstanding. Ironically, of course, you've now got Tatiana Maslany, who has jumped across to Marvel because she's now playing She-Hulk, and you've got Kirsten Ritter, who's jumped from Marvel to Orphan Black. So, yes, that's kind of fun. But so that is going to be one to look out for. It's AMC that are making it. Obviously, that means we have no idea where it'll land over here, because sometimes those shows land on AMC. Sometimes AMC just go for the money and sell them to other people. Sometimes they do both and they launch on AMC first and then get sold on to other people. So hopefully it'll show up somewhere and we'll see. But yeah, that's called Orphan Black Echoes, and it's in the works at the moment. It has been ordered, so it is coming. And lastly, we had a story from the BBC, and they're working on a revival of Gladiators, apparently, for 2023.
Another one.
So this is actually the second time they've revived Gladiators. I think Sky did it last time, which ran for 2 seasons. But for those of you that don't know what Gladiators is, I'm sure many of you do, but it was a sort of very much a 90s phenomenon, pitted members of the public against a team of, in quotes, professional gladiators in a series of physical challenges such as Duel, which is the well-known one of having 2 people on platforms trying to knock each other off with giant cotton wool buds, essentially pugil sticks as they were called. The Wall, where they had to race to the top of a climbing wall in 60 seconds, and then the Gauntlet, which saw one of the contenders have like 20 seconds to try and get past 5 different gladiators. And then they all ended in the Eliminator, which was this sort of brutal run, which rather than pitting against the gladiators, pitted the 2 challengers against each other to get through this ridiculous assault course, which had this sort of travelator thing at the end, which usually tripped people up and didn't quite make it to the top. I remember watching it an awful lot lot, particularly the original ITV series. I watched that quite a bit. I mean, I don't have a huge amount of interest in coming back to watch this as well, but BBC is in talks with MGM Studios, who apparently hold the rights to it right now, although the studio that will be producing it is a company called Hungry Bear Media, who are the people behind Michael McIntyre's The Wheel and Michael McIntyre Big Show. So they will be the people that would be actually making it. If they do make it, it looks like it's going to be shot in Sheffield at the Sheffield Arena. That seems to be the plan for it. They have had it in development for some time. They've even got some preliminary Gladiators picked out for a trial run through before they actually kind of green lights a potential full series. So it is quite a way down the development track by the sounds of it. Filming in Sheffield Arena in 2023 if it gets the go ahead, and then it will be broadcast, I would imagine, sort of September-ish. So it'll come into the autumn season at some point later in the year. That's where you need to look out. You need to go to Sheffield if you want to be able to go and watch it. So thoughts?
I was a huge fan, and I suppose I know we've done a breaking news today, and I know it probably doesn't appeal to our audience. Have you heard the other breaking news today about what ITV are planning on doing?
No, go on.
Bringing back they have got the rights to Big Brother.
Oh, no.
No. I know. So it's on to its third channel, but I think they're normal people. It's not the celebrity one. I saw that on Twitter earlier today. I knew it probably wouldn't make our list because it's not what our audience want, but I was just like, seeing Gladiators, I was like, oh my word, someone is really digging back to those early days.
Yes. No, I mean, I remember with Big Brother, I watched the first season of it, and it, as a social experiment, was quite interesting. Nobody knew what it was when it first came out. And now everybody knows what it is. So the people that apply for it, it's a bit like The Apprentice. It was sort of the first couple of seasons, they were sort of taken a little bit more seriously. And as you get into the later seasons of it, the people that are going onto it are just the most toxic, obnoxious people most of the time. So I have zero interest in any of those sort of shows. But I mean, I'd hoped that Big Brother had actually finally died, but it keeps on getting resurrected.
Yep.
What about with Gladiators? It's kind of big Saturday night entertainment fun, I guess. And I mean, they've done some of these sort of silly big shows, physical shows before. I don't know.
You know, when some things are just like they're of a moment.
Yes.
And I think when we all when I tuned into Sky in 2008, they sort of absolutely got the right audience, because I was a part of I was a teenager when the first season ran, so I was really into it on a Saturday night. And then by the time you get to 2008, you're an early adult, and your occasional Saturday nights you'd be spending in, other times you're going out. It's sort of like the perfect pre-night out show. But it just didn't live up to the expectations that we expected. And I think that was the problem. Some shows are just of their moment. Mm-hmm. However much you try and redo them or revamp them or reboot them, doesn't always work. And so I'm just not sure. I mean, I will tune in. I will see what I like. But ultimately, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's not the sort of thing that I would probably spend my time watching at this point, but I can sort of see the appeal of it for the BBC as being a sort of big, over-the-top Saturday night entertainment show. I can sort of see some appeal to that for them. But whether it'll work, it will very much depend on casting of the Gladiators and the presenters and how they approach it and put it together. So we'll see. But potentially coming in 2023, probably towards the end of 2023. But we'll see whether it actually does get picked up. But it is certainly in development and some way down the development track. So that's all the news we've got for this week. Just some time for some highlights for next week on TV. So, highlights for next week. Not a huge amount coming next week, which is quite a relief because there's enough stuff out there right now anyway.
I love a quiet week.
Yes. New Amsterdam, though, that is returning on Sky Witness for Season 4. That is the 3rd of August at 9 p.m. That's coming back. I really like that show, so I'm glad to see that coming back. I think there's one more season to come after this as well. So, it's got 5 seasons, but this is Season 4 landing here. Code 404 back for a 3rd season. That's on Sky Comedy. That's on the 4th of August. That's at 9 p.m. That's that sci-fi comedy with Stephen Graham and Daniel Mays as two top detectives. One of them gets replaced by an AI. Beavis and Butthead make their return to Paramount Plus in a new series, described as Mike Judge reimagines his Gen X creations for a new Gen Z world. That is coming on the 4th of August, so you'll be able to check that on Paramount Plus. The Sandman, probably the biggest thing that's launching this week. That's on the 5th of August. That's coming to Netflix, which is, of course, Neil Gaiman's adaptation of his acclaimed comic book. He's involved in producing it. I'm not sure whether he's writing it, but he's involved in producing it, certainly, and been heavily involved in the series. Very much interested in seeing that. And Van der Valk, which is that remake which starred Mark Warren of the classic detective series. That returns for a second season after, I think it was 2019 or something, the last season of that was out. That's on ITV on the 7th of August at 8 p.m. That drops. So that's another detective drama for you to go and check out. That's Van der Valk Season 2, 7th of August at 8 p.m. That is everything coming for the next week we have for you. Gray, if they want to reach out and talk to you over the next week, where can they find you?
They can follow me on Twitter at Gray the Geek as I manically try and prepare myself for my first holiday abroad in however long, 2020. Oh, it's been so long. So yes, come and follow me on Twitter and you'll see me having fun on my first holiday for a while.
Yes, I'm looking forward to plenty of beach photos.
Not too many, maybe just of like my knees looking out.
Yes, there you go. For other people involved in the show, you can of course go and find Bex, who is over on twitch.tv/Trista Bytes. That's BYTES, streaming daily with lots of just stupid silliness, killing off Lara Croft on her Tomb Failure streams and chatting in boxes and all sorts of other ridiculous madness over on there. Always worth going to check out Bex. She's very, very funny and highly entertaining. Matt is of course over on entertainmenttalk.org, and you can catch us doing Westworld over there and Better Call Saul. We're doing both of those podcasts weekly right now over there, plus lots and lots of other things which you can go and find Matt on entertainmenttalk.org. And Daryl you can find at hollywoodnorthnews.net for all those TV series that you love which are shot in Canada. For us, you can visit the website at geektown.co.uk throughout the week and see all the latest air date information. If you want to get in touch with your questions or comments, email us on podcast@geektown.co.uk. Leave a message on the website post. Find us at Geektown on Twitter, on Facebook at facebook.com/Geektown, on YouTube at youtube.com/Geektown, and on Instagram at Geektown UK. That is everything. We shall be back next week. See you then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow.